transformation isn't sweet and bright. It's a dark and murky, painful pushing, an unraveling of the untruths you've carried in your body, a practice in facing your own created demons, a complete uprooting before becoming. Hi, beautiful people. This is Alana Wilson. I am your host. Today we have Ginjer on. Hi, Ginjer. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. So, Ginjer, so tell me, where are you from?
So originally grew up in St. Augustine, Florida, and then I currently reside about 45 minutes outside of New Orleans.
Okay, wow. So what is that like, New Orleans? Oh my God, there's so much going on there.
New Orleans is different. Pre-Katrina New Orleans is a totally different world than post-Katrina.
Wow.
They're still dealing with a lot of issues from Katrina 20 years ago and COVID. And the most recent storms, Ida, came through 2 weeks after.
They just can't get a break.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
2 weeks after I moved there in 2021, Ida came through and tore through most of the area. The house I rented, because I bought a house and we were renovating it, so I was renting another house on the water while we were renovating my current home. And it had, within 2 weeks of moving in, I got custody of my brother's 2 kids. I had a 1-year-old son and then 2 dogs, and I had over 3 feet of water in the house.
Wow.
Yeah, so we had to move out of there, obviously.
Wow.
But yeah, that was my introduction to the area.
I feel so bad for and there's so many documentaries on Hurricane Katrina and everything that was going on with it. And so many people that systematically were oppressed and harmed when it comes to, Katrina, and there were so many injustices when it came to certain communities that didn't get help versus other communities. And just to see that and to see the behind the scenes of that is crazy, honestly. But yeah, I mean, so New Orleans, that must be, you must have been to New Orleans, right?
Yeah. I've experienced New Orleans.
Yeah. So what's that like?
They're suffering right now. Again, they're suffering the effects of post-Katrina, post-COVID, and a poor mental health system, a poor justice system. They're underserved by their police and their community. They are putting money into funding mega prison facilities for children instead of funding public services, instead of funding mental health facilities, instead of putting money towards their homelessness and their drug crisis. They want to put the money in preventing abortions and in basically locking up children.
Yeah, and detaining children.
A lot of the crime is committed by kids, so to be honest with you, I don't know what the statistics are, but if I had to guess, I would say probably 40% of the crime over there is committed by people under the age of 21. Wow.
It's just crazy to hear that, but what they don't understand is that there's cycles, there's generational traumas and cycles and oppression and so many things that lead to people and children making the decisions that they make. And it's sad to hear that children can actually make certain decisions that will affect their whole life, even though the decision was made as a child.
Sometimes the decision's made and they don't even realize they've made a choice.
Yes.
That's probably the most harmful, is when you don't realize as a child or a juvenile teen that the action you are about to take is actually a choice. Right. And that choice is going to trickle down lots of other circumstances and opportunities or situations, let's say, where you're going to be presented with another choice. And every time you keep going left, you know what I mean? You start in the middle of the road, right? And you go left once, you go left twice, you go left 3 times. Next thing you know, you can't even see the center of the road anymore. Right. Does it make sense as a euphemism for how crime makes sense. And how things happen? Yeah.
So I kind of I'm very interested in your background and everything. Tell me what was your childhood like?
So I grew up in St. Augustine, Florida. Both my parents had trauma. They never resolved. Neither one of them graduated high school. My father was a small business owner. My mother broke her back when I was like 2 or 3. So she had probably 13 surgeries from the time I was born until I was, I would say, 14 years old. A lot of my memories are of her in the hospital or her just not feeling well. You know, she had tumors removed. My mom grew up in Tennessee, and they never lived in a place more than 3 months. They were abused heavily by her father, who was an alcoholic. A lot of her siblings were sexually abused. She was the oldest of 5 children, and she used to lock the younger ones in a closet when the dad would come home. They married her off to someone when she was like 12. They married her off to some guy. He beat the shit out of her and took all their money. She had it annulled and ran away because the state tried to place her back with her family. And then she met my dad when she was like 16. He was 8 years older than her. So he was 24 and she was 16. He came from a different family than she did. And they got together and they've been together since. But there was a lot of stuff that they never sorted through, and it affected us as children. But I think people are just people at the end of the day, and you do the best they can. And I will say that, like, my parents did love us, and they do love us, even if, while I tell my story, it may not sound like that.
So it's so interesting to hear the things from your perspective and everything. I'm almost interested in thinking, like, how does that affect you generationally? How do you feel, like, where do you find your place in all this?
Where are you referencing? At what point in my life are you referencing to compare it to now?
Yeah, I would say, like, where do you, like, within all of that trauma, I'm saying, like, where do you find yourself?
So I think you find yourself in the chaos and then in the silence, right? So who you are is somewhere in between, right? Because you're not who you are in the chaos because you're in survival mode, and you're not who you are in the silence because then you're usually processing and reflecting the trauma that you didn't have time to process while you were in the thick of it and while you were in survival mode. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I am everything that is in between, and that is my story, all the in between. I think that I know that a lot of the things that I experienced as a child affect who I am today, and they affect how I view myself. And there are a lot of little things that I do that are driven by feelings that come up from memories associated with my childhood. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So, like, I dress a certain way and I interact with people a certain way because of things that were said to me as I was growing up. And I think most people are like that, right?
Right.
We're all just a big gumbo of experiences that we had as children that have shaped our perception of what and who we are, right? Because perception is reality. If you live in your head, that is your reality, right?
Right.
And if everybody believes something, then it's true, even if it's not. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying to you?
I definitely can understand how we are like energetic sponges.
Yeah.
In the world. We suck up, especially when we're young, but as we get older as well, like, we're all just these energetic sponges. We soak up whatever energy is around us. It's very difficult to not become the 5 people that you are around. So that's why it's so important to have like 5 good people around you that support you, that are positive, because if they're not good people, then they can tend to, bring you down, honestly. But it sucks because as a child, you don't really get to choose who those 5 people are. A lot of the time they are just, who you're born around. So tell me more about some of those experiences and those memories that really shaped your childhood.
I think the biggest ones started more when I was, like second to fifth grade, I have a lot of memories of just trying really hard to please people. And I think that's definitely a personality trait of mine, is like, I'm a people pleaser. I want to fix things. I want to make people happy. I don't want to be, if I'm around somebody and they're sad or they're upset, I want to find out why. I want to feel like the person feels heard, and then I want to see if I can make them feel better.
And why do you think that is?
Because as a child, I was raised in chaos, and I had to manage the emotions of adults in order to feel safe. That's exactly why. And that's, in a nutshell, basically who I am now. Is like, as an adult, I'm constantly, like, your micro expressions. If we have a conversation now, if I start to talk about something and it makes you visibly uncomfortable and I can see it in your face even for half a second, I will pull back because I don't want to disrupt what you have going on.
Right.
Even if it's to get to the point, right. Even if it's to get to a point that may save someone's life, a lot of times I'll choose self-preservation and pull back. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are like that.
It makes complete sense. And I think that you're speaking on behalf of so many different people that could be listening to this. Because there's so many people that, you know, they choose self-preservation over saying something that could be, you know, could hurt somebody else, whether they don't intend it to or not, or whether they intend it to or not, I should say. You know, and so it's so important. It's not just about hurting people. It's about that awkward feeling of making somebody uncomfortable and not wanting to be responsible for making that person uncomfortable. So tell me about the connection that you had with your mom and what that dynamic was like.
It was lacking. I always felt like my mom viewed me as competition. I'm the only daughter in the family. My cousins were boys, my brothers were boys, obviously. So, and my mom used to say things like, I always wanted a daughter and then I had you. So, you know, and I get it, you know, I think to my father and the way he interacted with my mother and the way he treated her and everyone in the family, we were always like on eggshells with my dad. Everybody catered to his mood, you know. If he was in a bad mood, everybody stayed away. They learned not to poke the bear, essentially, you know. And the way he would treat my mom when he was in a bad mood basically set the standard for how everyone in the home treated her, right? And the way he treated me in the home set the standard for how everyone else in the family and even people outside of the family treated me and viewed me. I remember lots of times he would say the same things to my mom, like, you're fat, you're stupid, I never should have married you, like all types of things like that. And again, it comes from a place of like unhealed trauma. It really had nothing to do with her and everything to do with him. But as a child, I would look at my mom and would be like, you are why my dad is unhappy. You are, because I was like a dad's girl.
You're a
daddy's
yeah,
girl. I always felt like my dad was really smart and was like unrealized potential. And I felt like it was my mom's fault. Like he was chivalrous and sacrificed or something. No, he made his choices. He made his bed and he laid in it. And then he didn't follow through with any of the dreams or goals that he had, and then was angry at himself and used that to blame my mom because all she did was what he said he wanted, which was get married and have kids. And then she got hurt, and she didn't have much of an education. She had like a 3rd grade level education because of the life that she had prior to meeting my father, which again she was not responsible for.
Right.
You know?
How do you think that her traumas played out in the way that she raised you?
They were everything. They were literally everything, the sun and the moon. Because my mom allowed my dad to steamroll her emotionally, right? Like I never saw my dad physically hurt or abuse my mom, right? But there was a lot of belittling, a lot of like, verbal I'm abuse. Better than you type stuff, which and then it carried on to the kids. And like I tell my mom every time I talk to her, how ashamed I am of the way I treated her as a young adult and as a teenager, because I was so entitled and I thought I knew so much and I thought I was so smart, you know, and then I realized really all I was a carbon copy of the hatefulness that my dad spit at her. And my mom really, when I look back at it, was when, like, you know, like my dad was my friend, you know, like my dad and I smoked pot together, like when I was a child, you know, like 14, 15, and that was really how we bonded. And my dad didn't bond with me until I lost weight. Like my dad used to call me Fatty G, and it fucked with me so bad. Like the neighbors would call me that.
I'm so sorry.
It's fine. And it would be like, I remember as a kid thinking, like, what could I have done as a child that was so horrible to make you hate me so much that you would allow not only my brothers and other people in my family, but you would say these things to me because I am a representation of you. So you hate yourself, too. And you hate what I represent, which, you know, because I believe that part of the problem with my family is, so I realize as an adult I'm autistic, right? I didn't know it as a kid, but as an adult I realized that I have I'm mildly autistic and I have ADHD, and I wasn't diagnosed until after I had children. And I realized that, like, a lot of my personality is a combination of trauma and my autism, right? And because I am who I am and I am what I tend to be pretty outspoken, and when something's not right, I say it. So you could, like when I was a kid, it was very easy to control me because you could tell me what the narrative was and I would go along with it because I was a kid and I wouldn't use, you know, my critical thinking and my reasoning. I would just believe because you were my dad and because you said, or because you were so-and-so and you said, right? But as I got older, it was harder to control the narrative of who I was and what I was and why that was my problem and not his problem. Does it make sense?
No, that makes complete sense.
And as a child, everything that he said to me that was negative I took on as it was my problem. It was something I needed to fix. So I developed an eating disorder at like 8th grade. My 8th grade year. Remember Miss Congeniality came out?
Yes.
How old are you?
I'm 25.
Okay, so I'm 39.
But I remember that.
Okay,
yeah.
so that hit theaters. The first one hit theaters when I was in like 8th grade. And I was like, she was losing weight by eating celery sticks and carrots. I could do that. Okay, well, I didn't like raw celery or raw carrots, so after a while, I just quit eating. I would skip breakfast before school. I would not bring anything for lunch, and then I would go home and would like eat a bowl of soup or like whatever. And I got to the point where I would go walk the neighborhood every time I got hungry. I would drink a bottle or a bottle of water and go walk the neighborhood until I wasn't hungry anymore, because I felt the need to be accepted by, you know, my dad. You know what I mean?
Tell me about that feeling.
It's empty. It's an empty feeling because you're chasing a well that never runs abundant. You know, I continue to go to a dry well of emotion, right? I continue to look for safety and comfort in someone who hates themselves and is so unhappy with their own choices and their lack of action, right? Because at the end of the day, I think that's really what it was. A lack of action is what made a lot of the situations that my family saw themselves in stay in and made them complacent, right? To where it was stagnant for them and they're emotionally dying, but it's so much harder to move and to do something about it than it is to just complain and to be stagnant and die a slow emotional death. Does that make sense?
Yes.
What I'm saying to you?
And when did you start to see your father for who he really was?
After I got sober. It was, so I remember the day, so I remember telling my dad that, so my boss at Domino's drugged me and had sex with me. He raped me. I was 15. He was in his 30s. And I told, my parents knew that this had happened. If you ask my father now, he'll say he didn't know that's what happened, but the facility called my parents and told them, basically because they wanted to know if my parents were going to sue, because everybody in the store was talking about it after it happened. I didn't want anybody to talk about it. I wanted it to just have not had happened, and I wanted it to just go away. I wanted to just be able to go to my job with where my friends worked and not have like people calling me a whore because the boss gave me drugs and told everybody he had sex with me when I was 15. He was in his 30s. I was not the only person. He did that too, by the way. He did that to 2 other girls. And I didn't find out until like years later. But when my dad heard about it, he had said, well, so this guy at your job, like, how old is he? Like, as if my boss giving me drugs and raping me would have been okay if he had been 18, or would it have been okay if he was 16 or 24? Was it the fact that he was in his mid-30s that wasn't okay? And then I remember talking to him about it, and he said, well, you're going to have to go to trial if we wanted to do anything about it, and they're going to talk about how you smoke pot with me and all this stuff. So like he basically wanted me to like act like it never happened, and that's what I did. Yeah, just forget about it. It's not worth. And so what I heard was, you are not worth fighting for. You are not worth the shame that you will bring to the family, because they will know that we smoke pot together, which again was his choice as an adult to smoke pot with me as a child. Right? But as a child, I felt like I held the burden of that guilt. So I felt like it was my responsibility to essentially just be okay with what had happened. So I just never really talked about it after that. The first time I actually ever talked about it was on Ian's show.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I didn't even say that I was raped. It took me telling the story probably 15 times before I could actually say that I was raped. Because for the longest time, I thought I just got I was drugged and had sex with my boss. And that was my fault.
And do you think that your father's way of handling that contributed to the way that you viewed that story for years?
Absolutely. I felt like I shared the responsibility, and like, you know, I don't know. I must have done something that made him think that it was okay to treat me in this way, right? But again, you know, I find out later he'd been doing this for people for years. It just happened that corporate found out about it with me because he told everybody. I remember too, like, not really wanting to process that. And I remember it was hard for me to relate to my peers after that happened. So I felt like I always kind of related to older people. I hung out with my brother a lot, who, you know, was into the Oxycontin scene and stuff at the time. And after I had my heat stroke and they started giving me Oxycontin, that was where I learned to abuse them, was, you know, through my brother and his friends. So a lot of my issues started in home. I was not a case of like, oh, she hung around the wrong people.
Right.
No, like I was born into a family that never dealt with their traumas. So they manifested in other small fires, you know, in the forms of drugs, in the forms of arguments, in forms of grandiose thinking. In the forms of thinking as a victim, you know. And I'll be honest, I really think the toughest person in my whole family is my mom, you know. Because like a lot of the stuff that like I look at from when I was a child, I'm like, dude, that would have like broke me if someone would have said the things to me that were said to her. And like she just rolls off my back. I know that's not true, right? But that is like how she kind of views it. I think it's because, again, of her childhood. She had such a bad childhood, and they were always taught, like, you don't talk about it, you don't tell anybody, they'll take you away if you tell people what's happening, and it'll be even worse than what's happening, you know. And I think that's something that's a control tactic, right? And
it's interesting because when you mention control, I almost feel the need to go back to your whole eating disorder as well.
I couldn't control my family and how they felt about me, so I could control what I consumed and in effect control their feelings, because if I control what I consume, I therefore control my weight. And if I control my weight, I therefore control that you can no longer call me Fatty G because I'm not fat anymore, so it's no longer applicable. So therefore, I control the way you feel about me and the way you view me. It's that fast. The connections in the brain with it goes something as simple as a comment about somebody's weight, and that's how it manifests into something physical. You know what I mean?
And I just want to say, just because you told me so much in this moment, and thank you so much for trusting me with this information, and sharing your story, because you're helping so many other people. But I want to say also, I want to go back to what you were mentioning about how, you felt like it was your fault, and you were made to believe that you played a part in what happened to you, at that chain. And just know that none of that was your fault. None of it was your fault. You did nothing to contribute to being a victim in a situation when you were so young and he was so old, and he knew what he was doing, and he knew
absolutely
he was able to take advantage of you. And so I know that your brain knows that, but I think your heart still doesn't.
It's really
and you're
hard.
Trying to connect the dots there.
It's really hard to get the brain and the soul to connect when for so long your soul feels the weight of other people's thoughts on a situation they didn't really know much about. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense.
Yeah, I think too, I think that's part of why once I was exposed to a painkiller, I think that's why I latched on so well. I also know statistically women, especially women that enjoy marijuana, which I was always one, you're 50% more likely to become addicted to pain medicine. If you
and I will say marijuana, I don't want to say it's the gateway drug for everybody, but I do believe that if you're introduced to it at a young age, if you are more inclined to, be introduced to trauma, then you're also more inclined for it to be the gateway drug for you. So again, I'm so sorry that was your life experience and that you were introduced to something so young. So it's almost like, is there a part of you that feels like you didn't have a fighting chance?
I don't know that I would say that, because then I think if I were to say that, it would take the accountability off of me, right? Because at the end of the day, right, so as somebody who's dealt with addiction, I have to realize I have a disease of perception, right? So if I start saying things like, well, it's your fault, or this wouldn't have happened if, that's not a good path for me personally. Yes. Because it's really easy for my brain to make the switch of, okay, well, this happened, and it happened. So now we're going to move forward, and I'm going to see how I can help people and how I can work through this. How is it a tool versus a disadvantage? Versus the switch goes to, I'm a victim. This shouldn't have happened to me. Why did this happen to me? What did I do to deserve this? Right? Because these are all, I've had both narratives on both sides, and I didn't feel like my life got better until I chose to say, okay, well, this happened and it is what it is. What do I do with it now? I think that for my particular story, my accountability would be, for me, I didn't hold any responsibility in what happened. I held responsibility in the fact that I knew I should tell people, and I didn't, because I let the shame and the guilt wear me down, right? And I let the worry of judgment from other people cloud my judgment on how to handle the situation. And I believe that was the lesson in that whole scenario for me.
I love that you pretty much just answered my next question. My next question was, why didn't you report? And I love that question so much, because it's such a complex question.
Right.
And it's something that people, they love to ask, and they love to throw it in your face of like, you know, you didn't report, you know, because you didn't, you know, it didn't matter to you, or because it, you know, nothing really happened. But people don't report for a numerous amount of reasons, whether it be disassociating. Right. Like I know for one, I have a history of, you know, sexual abuse in my past, and with me, I disassociated for years.
Yep.
And then there's also what kind of similar to what you were saying, telling yourself that it went and it played out a different way, so that you kind of, you know, tone it down and make it acceptable.
Right.
Would you say that you did that? Like in your mind, your own mind did that
to survive.
To survive.
Because so what it would have torn me apart, because you have to look at it threefold, right? Like, okay, so you had this traumatic thing happen. If I blame myself, well, then I can kind of control. It's probably not going to happen again because it was my fault it happened. Versus if I had no part in it, right? He was going to choose me as a victim one way or another, regardless of how I responded, right? Let's say that's the scenario. Then I have no power in that situation. But if it's my fault, if it happened because I was too friendly, or it happened because I didn't report, then I can make sure it doesn't happen again, because now I'm not going to be friendly anymore. I'm being an asshole now to everybody. You know what I mean? And I'm not, if the next time somebody crosses a boundary, they're going to know right away that I don't play those games, and that it's not going to fly, and that I'm willing to lose my job, or I'm willing to go to jail, or I'm willing to be embarrassed in public so people know what happened. You know, does it make sense?
And it's horrible that people have to get to that point. Like they have to, you know, like there's this whole, you know, stigma around, you know, victims of rape and sexual abuse and all of that. And it's this idea that, like, we have to, you know, we shouldn't have dressed a certain way, or we should have stood up for ourselves, or we should have said something, or we should have not said something, or we should have, you know, not worn that, or we should have worn less or more, or, you know, and it's this whole idea that is so disgusting. And I really, again, I just want to tell you again, you did nothing. You did nothing. You did everything the way that you needed to survive that moment and afterwards, and dealing with it afterwards. And so your brain made it okay for itself.
Right.
And so I want to clap for you, because you survived. You're still surviving. You're healing. Healing is a process. It's not linear. And I was just saying this in the last podcast as well, is that healing is not linear. Healing is something that is, you know, it's up and down. You go 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, yada, yada. And I can even imagine sobriety goes in that direction as well, where, you know, that's what it is. Tell me about your, you know, how everything took you into, you know, that journey into, you know, being, you know, not sober. Like what happened there?
So I started smoking pot at, I would say 13, right around the time. So I started with the eating disorder first, and then the pot came. And I say all the time that I felt like smoking pot helped save my life. And I'm not advocating for marijuana, but I'm saying for my circumstance, I would not have ever eaten. Mm-hmm. I would have just kept not eating. I went from a size 16 to a size 6 in one school year. Wow. Because I just quit eating.
Is it hard for you to like see pictures of yourself at that time?
No. I'm just like, yeah, I was super thin. And it's crazy as I was even thinner after I had my first son. Like you could see my bones and stuff. But that's because I had hyperemesis while I was pregnant. I was already thin before I got pregnant, and then had hyperemesis and threw up like the whole pregnancy. It was just miserable. But I remember looking at pictures, holding the baby, and the baby's like bigger than me. You see like my collarbone. I was like, wow, I look really sick.
Wow.
That's what I just remember thinking. I look really sick, you know, and nobody said anything. Nobody ever was like,
concerned,
you know,
or like asking questions.
Right. Because it was kind of normal.
How would you say that the way that you were parented affects the way that you parent now?
it has everything to do with the way I have more meaningful, I feel like, moments. I parent with intention versus I feel like I was parented based off of time. If that makes sense. Like everything was a rush as a kid. Like I remember my mom always, I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. And it's not, she didn't work full time or anything like that, but she was sick a lot, and she was ran around, she helped my dad. My dad ran a business. So I always remember feeling like nobody had time for me. Like there was just not, and I don't ever remember any play like with my parents at all, ever. I remember trying to get my mom a couple times, it just wouldn't. And then like my dad was tired a lot, so I just remember being alone a lot as a kid. I read a lot. I spent a lot of time in the library. I was a very avid reader. I was, grades ahead of my academic level because I really enjoyed like doing that. And I really didn't have, my brothers were 6 and 7 years my seniors, so they were in a different phase of life than I was. By the time I hit 12, my oldest brother was already in the military. He was out. He'd been out of the house for 2-3 years already. So I think that affected it too. I remember feeling just lonely a lot. We didn't live in a neighborhood really. We lived kind of in the middle of like nowhere. Like the only people in the area were all related, and they were just different than we were. They were just they were raised different. They had different hobbies. I was like a girl, like tea parties and like Barbies and stuff like that. And these girls were killing frogs. Like they're outside throwing rocks at birds, and I didn't want the bird to get hit with a rock. I didn't feel like it was fun.
Yeah, you weren't. Yeah, you weren't able to really like.
I understand
identify with that.
Yeah. So I just felt alone a lot. So I learned how to deal with that. I learned how to be fine with my own company after a while. And then I think when I hit high school, I really shifted. I became like a little more outgoing once I lost some weight. I was always pretty smart, and really good in the classroom. So I felt like I started to take on more physical things and started to excel in other areas and really get a sense that I was not who my parents or like other people said I was just because they said that. And just because you are something temporarily, like everything in life is temporary. Literally everything is temporary because we're not going to be here forever, right? So like what seems like a big deal right now, if it doesn't matter in 5 years, who cares? But a lot of the things that I struggled with as a child affected who I became. You know what I mean? And they really affect the interactions and all of the relationships, not just parenting. All of the relationships that I have are affected by how I was interacted with my family and my friends as a child.
Tell me about what your like parents' relationship looks like now.
With me or with themselves or with each other?
With each other.
They're not that happy. They haven't really been happy in a long time. I know. I think they stay together because they feel it's necessary. I think that neither one of them, they've been together a really long time. I feel like my mom feels like there's a lot lacking emotionally. I feel like my mom feels very alone in her marriage to my dad. And I hope I never have a husband like my dad.
Wow.
Which is sad, because what's crazy is like if I could pinpoint the moment that I really cut the chain of servitude and the chain of like obligation to my father was when intervention was going to come. So intervention gets like 10,000 letters a day, right? Wow, yeah. So I was on the show in 2015. I remember I worked with them, like talked to them for 3 months on the phone before they ever committed to coming out. And the only reason why they wouldn't commit was because my parents didn't want to commit to doing the show. And I remember, so like I knew intervention was coming because I wrote them, right? So like I orchestrated my own intervention because I was going to shoot myself in the head in the backyard.
Wow.
Men were financing my drug problem. It was not something that I wanted to continue to do. It wasn't something I could keep doing, right? So I remember writing intervention thinking, God's going to send intervention. I had no doubt in my mind. I knew he would because I talked to God and I was like, I have a date. If by, sorry.
No, you're okay. You're okay. This is a safe space.
I remember telling God, like, I didn't want to do another Christmas or birthday high and loaded and having to live like that. And, like, my birthday is 2 days after Christmas. So, and my niece's birthday is December 16th. So I told myself and I told God that if I wasn't sober and intervention didn't come, I was going to kill myself after my niece's birthday, but before Christmas, because I didn't want her birthday to be affected as much. And I know that's like such a shallow statement of like, oh, well, if you do it 2 days after, it won't affect her birthday. Of course it would have affected her birthday, right? It's my niece. I was really close to my brother's kid, my middle brother's kids. But you know, I didn't want to ruin Christmas either for everybody. So I wanted to hit like that sweet spot of like the 20th where I was going to shoot myself in the head if they didn't come. So I said if they weren't there by her birthday, which is the 16th, I was going to shoot myself before the 20th in the backyard. And I was going to do it in the backyard because I didn't want my landlord to have to pay to clean the inside. Because like I thought about it, you know. And that was the only time where I had actually ever like really made a plan. You know, I think as an addict, right, someone who had been in and out of addiction and in and out of poor mental health, right, for years, I think most people that go through those phases at one point will look on their life and say, I wonder what it would be like if I wasn't here. But it's a whole other thing to say, I have a plan. I know how I'm going to do it. I know when I'm going to do it. I know where I'm going to do it. Because that makes it real.
That makes it real.
It makes it real, right? It's no longer just the idea of, I feel sorry for myself. Would anybody care if I was gone? Maybe they'd be better off without me, right? It's a plan of action. Intervention came December 16th. They came on they were there before that, but my actual intervention was my niece's birthday. It's crazy too, because they had said they were going to do it on the 20th, but they got enough footage of me using within the couple of days that they were there. They were like, hey, we got enough. We're going to call it early. We got Christmas to go home to. But before they came, I remember my dad came over to my house, and they never came over for anything. I forgot why they were there. I think my brother's kids were there. They were picking him up or something. Because this is after prison. I didn't have a driver's license still, so it was before I had won my appeal. But I just remember sitting in the house. I remember telling my dad that I wrote intervention, and he said, they won't come for you. Intervention will never come for you. And because we had written them before. We'd written them years and years before I went to prison. We'd written them years before. And they didn't come because I was on bond, is what were told then. We got like halfway through the process, and they were worried because I was on bond. I was going to get sentenced while they were out there, and then it would affect the show, yada, yada, yada. So they didn't come at that point. But either way, so after, when I wrote them this time, they came. They did the show.
And they came because you were meant to live.
Yeah, well, and I pushed. Nobody else was going to write intervention for me. I remember as a kid or watching the show as a young adult and being like, wow, they have family that love them enough that they would write the show and tell everything that the family did and how this person ended up that way. They love them that much. You know what I mean? And I remember people commenting too in the comments, saying that it was a weird episode because they felt that the family dynamic was odd. And there's even a point at one point in the show, I won't forget this either. I was showing the camera and as we were talking, we were recording the show, pictures of me as a baby, and there's one where I'm drinking out of the syrup bottle, I'm drinking syrup out of a syrup bottle. My dad goes, well, no wonder why you were fat. And I was like, so I turned the camera, I was like, you got that, right? And they were like, yeah, we got it. Wow. So they made sure to air that shit too. So thanks to them at least, because at least it didn't make me look like a liar,
So I almost want you to talk to the camera and give those people at home that also don't have family that care enough about them to write the show intervention. Can you be that person for the people on the camera and give them some advice?
Be your own advocate. No one will ever ride as hard for you as you will. No one's going to save you. There's no white knight coming. This isn't, a movie. Like, at the end of the day, what is your life worth to you? What are you willing to do? Are you willing to kill the person that you are right now in order to have a new life? If I could tell you and I could promise you that it would look different if you would literally kill the person that you think you are, metaphorically and emotionally, to go start new. Would you be willing to drop your ego? Would you be willing to drop your busy life? And would you be willing to admit that maybe what you're doing now isn't working and it's unmanageable? And if you can't say yes to the willingness, then ask yourself, can you do another 3 years like this? Can you do another 5? If the answer is no, then maybe you haven't hit your bottom, and your bottom is somewhere in between those 3 years and that 5 years. I don't know. I know that my bottom came when I put the shovel down, and that every time I picked the shovel back up, my bottom kept getting worse. Meaning every time I would either get some sobriety and would relapse, and I really don't even call it sobriety. I feel like just to claim sobriety, you're going to have more than like 90 days. This is for me, right? Mm-hmm. Because for me, if I was sober less than 90 days, I was taking a break. I wasn't really sober because I wasn't doing the work. And that's the next question. Once you're willing to let who you have become die, and some of the relationships have to die with that, and the ideas that have created those relationships and who you are now and the behaviors you have now, are you willing to let go of those ideas and look at something in a new light with a new perspective? Because that is the only way I have seen and I have found success. I had to kill every idea that I had for my life prior to getting sober. Anything that I thought I was going to do, or I thought I was or would be, is not what I have become today. And I'm a much better version of myself now than I ever would have been able to materialize without getting sober.
And that is so deep.
And without a community. So that's another thing too, is like, what does your community look like? It can't be that great if you have to write intervention for yourself, right? Right? Like, you don't have 2 people that'll ride hard enough for you and that love you enough to say, I love you, I won't watch you kill yourself. Then you're in the wrong room, bro.
Yep.
Go to a different room.
Gee.
Find your community, because it's you might be the problem, but you're not the only problem. Does it make sense?
Exactly.
Like, if you're always told that you're too much, and you're always told that you need to be something different than what you are, then you're not in the right environment. A polar bear looks weak in the fucking jungle, bro.
Yeah.
He's not meant for that. And a tiger don't look like shit when he's out in the ocean. You know what I mean? If there's no shore anywhere around, a tiger can't do a lot. They can swim really good, but that's about all he can do is tread water.
Right.
Are you trying to tread water, or are you trying to live? Right? Because treading water is just surviving.
Right.
I'm just staying here.
Yeah.
You know?
So we want to tell you we love you if no one else at home tells you that they love you.
For sure.
We love you. I love you. Get help today.
Yeah, your community needs you more than you will ever know. People that you have never met will be affected by your absence later on.
And I want to tell you, Ginjer, I love you.
I love you.
I mean that from the bottom of my heart, that I'm so glad this me, present day me, is glad that past you decided to get that help and to call intervention for yourself. Thank you so much for doing that. So for my last question, we're gonna bring it back full circle. And I never leave you off in a terrible way, because that's not what life is. Life doesn't leave us off in a terrible way. Healing is always possible. Healing is always possible. So what I want to ask you is, how can you just kind of think about everything that you've been through, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, and how can you bring it back to who you are today and how it led you to become the you in the best way today?
I am a better person now than I ever would have been had I not had the horrible experiences I had. I am a more compassionate person. I'm a more understanding person. I also am really good at reading a room because of always feeling the need to control my emotional environment. So I feel like I am more of an asset to people that are struggling because of my experiences. I can't help anybody if I can't relate to you, or I can't identify what you're going through without you telling me. Because if you have to tell me, then I've lost the whole point, right? Like if you have to come to me in tears, broken down, telling me that you're barely hanging on, then I'm probably not paying enough attention. If you're involved in my life. And that, I think, is my biggest takeaway, is that I'm not weak. I'm a powerful presence when I use my personality and my God-given talents in the right way. Meaning that I can impact more lives now than I ever would have done with my experience, right? And being able to be vulnerable and being able to be relatable. Because if you feel like you're different, then you don't belong. And I say this all the time in the rooms, of 12-step community. If I am different, then I am alone. If I am alone, then I'll be left to my own devices. And when I'm left to my own devices, I tend to basically find ways to harm myself and the people around me unintentionally. And if I am different, right? Let's say I'm in the rooms of the 12-step community and I don't relate to any of those people there. Well, if I'm different, then how will what worked for you work for me? Because we're not the same. I don't, but if we're the same, then what worked for you can work for me. So I should try, because otherwise I'm not going to have the success that you had, because what you had to do is you had to do the work. You had to do the emotional work and the physical work of identifying your issues. I don't really believe in triggers. I believe that there are core issues that we deal with and core belief systems. And sometimes you run up against something that comes up against one of your core beliefs.
Yeah.
And then you find something to be problematic. So how do you work around that? How do you navigate that? You know what your beliefs are. You know who you are, and you let other people know. That way people will stop crossing your boundaries if you're very firm. And this is my stance on something, and this is always how I'm going to respond if you bring this type of behavior to me. Does that make sense?
It makes
it very easy for people to know not to get mixed up, or not to get you mixed up in their mess. And it also lets people know too, if you're in a mess and you're not looking to mix me up in it, but you're looking for someone to listen or someone to help, I'm a good candidate for that. Because I'm willing and I've been there.
Yeah.
Right?
Ginjer, you are so powerful. You are inspirational. You are beautiful. You are amazing. Your energy and your aura is vibrant, and it is beautiful, and it is you're a survivor, and you were meant to be here. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Thank you so much for everything you shared with me and everything you shared with the world. and everything you do to just keep living and to keep surviving and to keep being here. And thank you for choosing you.
Thank you. And then if I could, just leave with one thing.
Yeah.
If your life sucks and you're thinking that you would be better off to not, and this can happen at any point. I went through this, the last year was the hardest year I've had in sobriety. I got pregnant and lost a baby, and then I'm in a state where they don't help you. So I had to go to a different state to get help. And it was one of the most devastating experiences I've had since I got sober. And it really tested my sobriety and my relationships. And I definitely had some mental health stuff where I was thinking maybe life would be better without me. The best way for me to get out of that is to immediately start trying to help another person. And I like to say what I've heard in the rooms a lot is, if you're miserable right now, try a new way of life for 90 days. Try 90 days, full throttle. Just do what is recommended, what is totally different from what you've been doing. And if you're still miserable in 90 days, we'll refund your misery and you can go back to what you were doing before. But if in 90 days your life has improved, even by a smidge, then there's hope.
Yes.
Right? Because I have seen the most desolate, destitute degenerates be able to literally turn their lives around and become one of the most impressive people in the room, as far as an emotional, physical, and mental well-being standard. So you don't even know who you are yet. Like, don't give up on yourself and essentially give up on your community, because you don't understand how impactful you are to your community until your community no longer has you.
Yeah.
Right? So don't give up on yourself before your miracle happens, because your miracle could be on the other side of sobriety. Your miracle could be on the other side of that new job. The miracle could be on the other side of that move to that new school or to that new state or that new relationship that you want to do, but something is, and fear is holding you back.
Yeah.
Don't let fear hold you back, because at the end of the day, all it is a life lesson if things go wrong, right?
Yep. Ginjer, thank you so much for these insights, this advice. Everyone is going to hear you, and you were put here for a reason. You experienced the things you experienced for a reason, and you're going to help so many. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having a podcast where people can come and feel comfortable, because you and I have had really no dialogue prior to this.
Yeah.
And you talked about my aura, but yours is one of like calm and peace and healing. And it's nice because I have an energetic and chaotic energy. So I felt like as soon as I sat down, it was easier for me to take it down a level. So I felt like it helped me to not get as worked up as maybe before.
Yeah.
Because you have such a calming presence.
Oh.
So it's really an understated
I try.
power. It really is.
I try so much to just heal everyone. Because I know what it's like to hurt. And so healing is just so important.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.